Let's turn now to the escalating trade war between America and its neighbour Canada following the collapse of talks last week. Canada has announced counter-tariffs as high as 50% on a range of US goods in retaliation to those imposed by the Trump administration. It's all getting a bit heated. The Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, has called Donald Trump a dictator and has said he can kiss my ass. He doubled down on those comments in a press conference yesterday.
I have a lot of real estate on my ass, so he has a lot of room to kiss my ass. President Trump underestimates us, and that's the biggest mistake, underestimating your opponent.
Let us speak now to Allie Renison, Director of the British International Freight Association and a former government trade advisor. Allie, hello. Who started this?
Actually, the dispute between Canada and the US on trade goes back a long way. There's a lot of claims and counterclaims on both sides about who was complying with the terms of their regional kind of North American trade deal. But certainly the ante has been upped by the Trump administration. They recently laid extra tariffs on Canada, accusing them of failing to sort of comply with their existing obligations, which is maybe it's not what you're used to from hearing from the Trump administration. Usually the accusation is the other way. But it's certainly going tit for tat now.
So Trump's threatened to increase tariffs on Canadian cars, and he said he might rename Lake Ontario as Lake America because it borders both countries, and it suggests he doesn't know which bit of America it borders, but never mind that. Canada, meanwhile, has threatened counter-tariffs on steel, aluminium, furniture, makeup, perfume, dairy products, machinery, and so on. Who has the most to lose here?
Well, I think that Canada, to some extent, finds itself similar to the UK did in a position as it did during Brexit. And I say that because effectively, Canada is sort of faced with this remorseless logic of its geographical proximity to a very, very powerful, close neighbor. So certainly in terms of if it really wants to go tit for tat on import tariffs, that's going to punish the Canadian economy. But I think that it depends on whether the trade dispute goes even wider than just classical tariffs. And you mentioned there the Ontario Premier, Mr. Ford, talking about, where he could go next. Would they cut off electricity, because of the cross-border proximity? So it depends on how willing Canada is to go in terms of the tools that they want to leverage.
Is there a particular thing that Donald Trump is trying to achieve here? Because this used to be tied in with his sort of quest to make Canada into, part of the United States, the largest state in the United States, and so on. But is there a more kind of sort of terrestrial economic objective?
It depends on which day I think Trump is talking about, because there's lots of different competing objectives. Some of them are complementary, some of them are competing. He says this is about trying to, initially the tariffs against Canada that he laid were about tackling the supposed sort of flow of fentanyl across the US-Canadian border. He would say one of the other objectives is to try and really kind of incentivize manufacturing to come back to the United States. But also he doesn't like the fact that, in terms of the trade balance, that basically Canada, in terms of its economic heft, there's a lot of dependence, I think, in both ways is the reality. And so what he wants to do is be able to put Canada in a position that they have to either sort of come back looking for a deal or they sort of move away. So ultimately, I think it's a lot of different objectives at the same time.
Look, finally, Allie, we all remember when Donald Trump had a press conference in the White House, game show style, announcing all those tariffs on more than 90 countries. To what extent did he carry through with any of those threats?
He did carry through with them. They were put in place, but the Supreme Court invalidated that. So President Trump found another legal basis. And some of those are actually well-established ones. So at the moment, yes, we've heard about this Trump always chickens out phrase, but I'd be careful about tempting the man in Washington too much, because he does tend to react, and sometimes with unique tools that go beyond the classical realm of trade policy.
Allie Renison, thank you very much indeed.
Daniel Lippman, he's White House reporter at Politico. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me. When I've been reading about the Trump administration and its policy on immigration, most of it seems to be driven by Trump's advisor, Stephen Miller, his deputy chief of staff, who basically has a rule of using every lever he can pull to ensure that the number of people coming to the United States is brought down. And sometimes the reasoning is less important than just sheer numbers. Is that a fair description of what's happened here?
I think it likely is that this has Stephen Miller's fingerprints all over it. And Miller is much more powerful in this term than in the first term. And so I think that they've really focused on a mass deportation program. They've had some hiccups in their immigration policies, like with what happened in Minneapolis and Maine with the deadly shootings. But it seems like that for the remainder of the Trump administration, there's going to be various policies like this to try to limit as much as possible the amount of immigration coming into the country.
So for some people, they'll just say, well, look, do anything that you can do. In Britain, we have problems with illegal migration and actually also with legal migration and the numbers coming in. And government seems to be quite frozen. It often can't do the things that it wants to do. And so in the United States, people look at it and say, oh, well, look, somebody's doing something. But on the other hand, the number of people who are uncomfortable with that have begun to rise, haven't they?
They have, and if you look at the polls, immigration used to be a positive issue for Trump, and now it's dragging him down. So there's a lot of Hispanic voters who voted for him in 2024 that have turned against him, that are not happy with how draconian the agenda has been. And so they thought that he would focus on the worst of the worst. And instead, it was kind of this dragnet where they would go out to Home Depot or construction sites and just pick up anyone they could to meet those numbers, where they wanted to try to get 1,000 to 3,000 migrants caught a day. What's interesting is that the White House doesn't talk about mass deportation as a phrase anymore, because they know that it's politically unpopular. And so they're shifting to other rhetoric, and they're talking about other issues instead of immigration.
It's a very interesting public opinion shift, and obviously very interesting to British audiences because of the way the immigration issue plays, to see that when you actually implement a policy of mass migration, it then changes the political complexion of support. This is also about a challenge by the courts, isn't it? The immigration visa pause comes after a federal judge struck down Trump's ban on application from immigrants from 75 mostly poorer countries. So do you think this is just a response to that, where Stephen Miller is saying, well, if you do that, I'm going to do this?
I think that's probably exactly right, where their courts have blocked a lot of the immigration stuff and other issues in this administration, but usually mostly lower courts, and not every issue gets to the Supreme Court. When it gets to the Supreme Court, they've been pretty deferential to allow Trump administration to do whatever policies they want. And so I think that this visa pause, we'll see how long it lasts, how long this new training takes.
Have we got any idea about that?
We don't yet, no. So it's I think that this is where people who are more Republicans who are more in favor of immigration, that they will, if it goes on too long, that they're going to be lobbying the White House to reverse it.
No,
and it will be interesting to see after the midterms how immigration policy changes under this administration.
That will be. I just wondered whether you think there's going to be a lot of sort of political resistance that will influence the midterms.
Yeah, I think that in terms of like resistance to these policies, the economy is the number one issue, and always will be, always has been mostly. But I think that they've tried to change the message often, where what's interesting is that instead of focusing on the issues, Trump has this huge super PAC called MAGA Inc. that he has $300 to $400 million, and he's going to start releasing ads and very soon. And they're going to feature him a lot, which is basically going to put him on the ballot, which may be a losing strategy for Republicans.
Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed to Daniel Littman, who was White House reporter of Politico, for explaining some of the background to the Trump visa.